It's easy to get lost. This is The Revenue Maze, and I'm Valerie Cobb. Join me as we navigate the halls, dead ends, and U-turns on your path towards upward growth trajectory. The Revenue Maze is sponsored by Revenue North Star, guidance and execution through fractional revenue leadership, uncovering hidden revenues, and empowering small business growth through process-driven sales customized to your company environment. Welcome, everybody, to another great episode of The Revenue Maze. I am actually super excited about this guest today. Amazing person. What I really love about this person, and you will love her too, is her vibrancy and excitement for all things business. However, a couple of fun, fast facts. She went across clear from New Orleans all the way to LA, listening to one tape, Diana Ross with her mom. I mean, that is a fun story. Huge basketball fan and poet fan. And she is currently CEO of CModel. Welcome, Teasha Cable.
Hi, how are you?
Today I am fabulous. Thank you for asking.
Very, very good. Thank you so much for having me. I appreciate it. Thank you.
No problem at all. We always answer one question at the beginning, and then we'll just have a lot of fun with this so that the guests have a lot of fun with this. But what is one thing that you can tell listeners and viewers that'll help them get out of the revenue maze?
So I would say that becoming an outcome-focused visionary will get you out of the revenue maze. And what that means is going from measuring how on everything and really focusing on why and letting that determine how things get done. So I think that if we do that, then the revenue.
All right. That is definitely easier said than done, because a lot of times we stop with the metric, right? And so what I would really love for you to tell because you've been a consultant for many years as well. Give us a little, like, you're in with a client and you were trying to explain how to go through this process. Let's just give us a day in the life of doing that.
Sure. So I usually start with a good example of, like, hey, so what is it that you're trying to accomplish? What would you like to do? And usually the response is, well, we want to get 8 customers, we need such and such amount of money, or we need to do X, Y, and Z. And there's usually numbers and metrics tied to it because those are KPIs. And so I usually go, okay, well, that's great, but why? Why are you trying to do that? And I'm going to say 90% of the time that makes people pause, right? So then there's like an assessment sort of process to really understand why folks are trying to achieve what they're trying to achieve, so that we can get them to a much better set of outcomes.
And I love that you say a much better set of outcomes. I mean, we always quote the Alice in Wonderland, doesn't matter where you're going if you don't care, right? I mean, I'm giving a summary, right? But I do that. And one of the things is, yes, you do kind of need to understand if you can get there. So the level of effort, you're saying we need 8 clients. Well, that's a level of effort, right? And so why do you need 8 clients? Why do you need, what are you saying? Because you get so pigeonholed in I got to have the 8 clients, but they're not even great 8 clients,
Right.
So I love that you kind of bring that up. And, through your history, you run into this all the time, right?
Yeah.
And so that's kind of shaped how you work things through. I mean, even in basketball, you're a basketball fan. I'm not really great at basketball. In fact, I have 2. Yeah, I'm terrible. I'm a tennis player. So anyway, but at the end of the day, that whole methodology, I'm sure, comes into play. Give us some examples from that.
Still, I think it applies to really everything in our lives. Like, I think it's super important to focus on why we're doing a lot of things. Like, I think that having purpose. And I was reading not too long ago about how like the generational shift in the workplace, for example, like one of the biggest things is the younger generation comes in, and it's very important that they have purpose, that they identify with why the company is doing things. So in our lives, we need to focus in on that intention. You talk about tennis. So my mom, this is just a side note, my mom wrote a book, and it was called Menopause, Sisterhood, and Tennis. And if I think about her purpose, right, in writing that book, she didn't write that book to teach anybody how to play tennis, right? She wrote that book in order to get through that process of menopause. So if you know that, when you go to read that book, right, then you have a completely different sort of mindset in reading it, because you know that she wrote that for her to get through menopause, not to teach anybody how to play tennis. The same is true with like our metrics. The same is true with when we decide what a business plan ought to be. What is the sort of core thing that we're trying to do? Like, I'm building a business because I want to be able to create opportunity. Oh, okay. So how I'm going to do that can be measured in a number of different ways. And we should just adopt that sort of framework in general.
Yes. I mean, I think we learn that from 2-year-olds, and you've had 2-year-olds. We've talked about your daughter having, playing, one of your daughters playing basketball, right? And so what's the first question they ask when they start being able to ask questions? What's the first question?
The first question
You tell them to do something and they do say what?
they go,
How or why? Usually
How?
it's why, because they don't care how. They're just like, why do I have to do this?
Oh, yeah, oh, kids. Oh, no, no. Oh, I'm sorry. Yes,
No.
exactly. Yes, learn from the 2-year-old. I'm sorry, went way focus on what you were saying. Yes, ma'am. That is absolutely correct.
Oh,
Yeah.
just
They go, why? Why do I need to do that? Why? Yeah, absolutely.
well, Teasha, you're on this wild ride with the zaniness of Valerie. So it's like, sometimes when I'm coaching a sales team or anybody in revenue, I go through this analogy and I get a blank stare, and it's like, no, that really is a question for you. And they're like, oh. So it's just an opportunity for me to do a little better at asking the question. But
Yeah,
yeah. 2-year-olds
totally.
always ask the question, why?
Sure do.
I'm not
They
going to do
sure do.
anything unless I'm convinced that I am supposed to do this, right? They go kicking and screaming when they run out into the road, and you grab them as a parent and say, you will not go out in the road. And it's like, they don't understand the why.
Right. Why can't I go out in the road? Why can't I touch this hot stove? Yeah, it's the same thing in the revenue maze. Why shouldn't you create a plan that says you're going to close 3 $1 million deals in 1 month? Well, you probably shouldn't do that, right? Because how long does it take to close a deal? There's so many things that go into why in business that we should be asking. But I find that it doesn't happen as often as people think, right? A lot of people are led to by what they already know, right? And so asking why sometimes opens up a door to learn things that are different than what your own perception or what you think things ought to be. And I find a lot of people don't want to face that. I don't want to know why. I just want to do what I want to do, right? And unfortunately, we have to retrain, especially as business leaders. No way to operate like that. We have to be able to dig in and understand multiple perspectives in order to find the best way to actually achieve.
Oh man, I love that, because I've thought of so many things while you were saying that, because we don't want to look under the hood, because we don't want to have feedback, because we don't want to be butthurt over having the feedback, because a lot of small businesses in our realm, when, whether we're using one of your tools, and we'll talk about that in a little bit, or whether we're actually, getting consulting. I'm not a consultant, right? And so we get confused all the time with that. But when we talk about the execution portion of it, part of it is being able to look under the hood and see what's not working. And what happens is we end up so often having somebody telling us, well, the marketing isn't working, the sales team's not working, the so-and-so's not working. And it's like, well, I'm the founder. In our world, a lot of times we're dealing with a founder or, just smaller businesses under 500 million, and they don't always have defined the why for everything that they're doing, but they've had a CEO running around or a founder who is now a CEO or whatever running around going, I've got this great model and everybody's buying into their charisma. And then they stall at what, 5 million, 1 million, something like that. And they're like, why won't everybody buy into this? Because then you can't get the humans to repeat what you're doing when you're trying to scale. So your charisma, I mean, people buy from people they like, right? And then they buy for their reasons. So your charisma doesn't carry you through, doesn't carry on to a salesman who's now trying to carry that same charisma. They're they're not 2-year-olds.
But they are in this scenario. That is exactly right. They're going to come in and go, why do you want me to take these 20 steps in order to get this customer to say yes? Why do you want me to, walk around the block 50 times and come back, jump up and down it, right? You're like, because that's the way I've been doing it this whole time, because customers like it when I do that. And then it doesn't work. Or why are we saying that this product does X, Y, and Z? Because that's one of the areas where things really get hazy. So as a founder, I'm really good at explaining it. One of the things that I know is super important as we think about scale is how easy is it going to be for someone coming into the company to be able to explain it? And not until we get to that point do we actually have something, right? Right now, me going out and being like, yep, got it, being able to dig deep, maybe use, lots of words, multiple paragraphs in order to explain it is okay. But when you try to scale, you need 10 words, right? And they need to be the same words every time. This is different. Yeah.
I just did a LinkedIn post that was on basically in a complex sale, try your hardest in 5 words or less, try to convey to BC 100 an airplane. That's where you're at in a complex sale. So what the craziness and about revenue mazes is getting out of revenue mazes is some companies literally go and they're just spending, and they're not at even revenue at that point, thinking that this is going to happen. In fact, I had a podcast guest, Clinton Louis, and he literally was talking about the craziness of Silicon Valley. You're from California, and how a lot of times companies are not ever meant to get even to revenue yet, and yet they're getting funding left and right. And this description that you just is like, well, if you can't even refine it that far on the why to be able to make it scalable, then how do you expect your sales team? And that's an expensive proposition, right? Because a human is a lot. So R&D into tools. So anybody who's like, well, she's just wrong, but you do have to take into account the R&D for the tool itself. But once you start paying humans, that's the wild card in your customer acquisition cost, right? Because they don't always work out, first of all.
Right.
We're not AI. We take time to ramp.
You have to ramp them. I mean, and honestly, when I left my last sales role, I mean, ramping can be, even in a company with a shorter sales cycle, the ramping of a salesperson to be able to adequately get out and sell on their own and be confident. Like, it's not even just about, oh, I know the information you gave me. I'm thinking you're in the 3 to the 6 months time frame,
At least.
Right? And that really does make a humongous difference. That sound just went off and you told me, you said, but then we messed around and did a few things. You actually told me, Teasha, turn that thing off. So my apologies, audience. So sorry, I didn't follow directions.
We were like, I was on this merry-go-round. I'm like, she's doing an infomercial about turning off your sound in the middle of a podcast. Thank you very much. Okay, that's our infomercial.
That's our infomercial. Don't do that anymore. Okay.
It's life in reality.
Absolutely. So yeah, so I absolutely agree that, I mean, we have to, and now bring me back to where we were
after the infomercial.
After the infomercial.
We were just talking about how customer acquisition cost is blown by the human element because of how long it's 6 to 9 months.
That's
typically on a sales cycle to get a human up to snuff enough to be productive. Yes.
Yeah. Okay, great. And one of the things that's super interesting about that 6 to 9 months is I think that you also have to include, like, what do people feel like when they're going through that ramping process? Because there is a confidence issue in the very beginning, you know, that it isn't there. It takes a long time to get to that ramp where the feeling and the emotion, the passion behind the products, which is the thing that actually makes someone buy from a person, that starts to show up way down in that ramp period, way longer. So I think that is, when we think about those customer acquisition costs, I think it's very important to consider those types of elements in the metric. I'd actually think that should be a metric.
Right? It should be. It should say, okay, at what stage are they producing what with the ramp up time? And then the reality is, you know, going back to the original premise, to get out of the revenue maze, any kind of human is going to need to understand the why. Other than the founder, they should understand it most, but a lot of times they don't. They just say, I got this gut instinct that this is going to be huge. And then we're back in segue mode, clear back when it failed, right? Because it just wasn't baked out properly, right? And I think that that's what draws me to the dialogue with you, because you get it. You got this, you understand this. And I think that's why I was so excited to have you on this show. Is it's the vibrancy of saying and tapping into the current culture in business and saying it's no different than when Simon Sinek said it or Dallin Oaks said it. There's like 100 before even Dale Carnegie said it, the golden why that we talk about all the time. But it just makes common sense. People are not going to even buy if you don't tap into their why. You don't solve the need and the challenge if you don't tap into their why, right? So I love that. So,
and it's hard.
How did you get here? You're building this is your shameless, pitch, but it's not really. But how did you get to see your company that you've been creating and working on?
Yeah, so from my roles in sort of leading in operations, revenue operations, sales operations, and then business development in the time, I also consulted in companies. And when I go out and do that, we find repeatable ways to assess them, repeatable ways to forecast revenue, repeatable ways to sort of look holistically at a business and go, okay, why aren't things working? Why are they missing targets? And so in doing that, I found, decision intelligence, which was actually this framework that I learned from a woman named Dr. Lori Pratt. She's probably the senior most person in this space, one of our advisors. And we, after figuring out that you could tactically take someone from action to outcome, I said the next thing is to go, well, if I look at business growth as its own sort of niche space, and we could use the DI framework to take people from action to outcome, could we put that in a SaaS web app technology? And we figured we could. Could we use artificial intelligence to produce a set of recommendations that are both, using large language, but then also expert, real, true people who have been in the room, who understand the pain and have really, truly solved the problems. Could I get them to produce recommendations, right, that we could then curate to users in this tool? Could we do that? And the answer was yes. And that is how CModel came to be. We decided that we were going to take those things. You have data, you have human expertise, and really a couple of different disruptive technologies, artificial intelligence, and some predictive analytics, bring them all together into a tool, a user interface that's super simple and easy, so business leaders can find their way through to find their ideal path to growth. That's really what CModel is about. So thank you for the plug. I appreciate the opportunity.
Well, I think one of the things that I when you and I engaged and we're talking about some of this is I think it's underappreciated. Now, there's a lot of talk about ChatGPT and AI models and all of those things out there. But one thing that I feel, until a small business owner or founder goes through it themselves and bangs their head up against the wall. I was actually doing a use case just now in a cybersecurity company that we're literally having to sell to a multi-billion-dollar company, but the go-between between us and the multi-billion-dollar company is really who we're selling to. So this small company who is around 5 million is literally trying to engage with a massive organization with a lot of legalities and a lot of different things. And so we were sitting there going through the proposal and trying to estimate, because we won't be a seat at the table. Like normally I want to be at that table with that bigger company, right? And I'm trying to estimate the questions from the bigger company and trying to sell the smaller company to the bigger company in order to help this cybersecurity firm secure their deal. So that's how complex this deal is. And sometimes when you're working through that in like, you're done, you either win, you don't win, and you do your debrief and you look back and said, well, maybe I could have cut the sales cycle down, or maybe I could have focused on this question instead of this question. Maybe I could have done X, Y, Z. And in the interim, you've lost $250,000 to $1 million deal, and the ramp time of a sales rep and the ramp time of a sales engineer. And if I go through the whole cost computation, the deal is really worth more like 3-4 million in level of effort. And your company will then say, hey, we're going to take some modeling based on human interface, AI interface. We won't even bring Moore's law into the whole equation of how, anyway, well, but you're saying that you're pulling that all down, and I don't even know how much your system costs, but against a $3 million or $4 million deal, wouldn't that information just be worth every penny?
100%.
That's all I come to.
55% it would, because most people don't think in terms of like causal chains, right? You don't think about for everything that I do, what is the relationship to something else? So if I go out, and we've got to invest the $3 to $4 million in order to get, X, Y, and Z, that becomes it could be a burden. Your company can actually lose money, right, taking on some of these deals. But what if you had the opportunity to really map out a causal chain before you start doing something, right? So, and you get to map it out from how many people will I need to do it? When will I see the impact of a particular thing? What are the right set of actions that are going to drive me right towards not just the KPI, but the outcome itself, the thing that I really want? In most cases, you're looking for some level of growth in your business. And you can really underestimate what it takes to calculate the growth part, right? And that does take in what I'm spending, right? That you got to take that out. You don't get to just count the revenue. in that number. So I think it's a really big deal to be able to look at a decision and go, should I do this? It's not always can, right? But should we take this step? Should we grow in this way? And having access to a set of information to help you do that, or an easy tool to move stuff around and really look at not just an annual plan, as most people go, oh, we do financial modeling. That is not what this is. We tie in numbers, right? You get the value of a number, but what you really get is the view of the decision itself, right? And that is the most important thing.
I think if I were to, and this is dumbing it down to Valerie World, and this is my shameless plug for Revenue North Star, right? Is if I were going to dumb this down, it's the human effort that we put into for new product. So when we're vetting, we do stage gate processes, ideation, and we go through 20 gazillion different models to say, do it now, wait, or do it later. And if I go back to my Star Trek geekiness, there's 5 gazillion outcomes. Ask the computer and they tell you, no, it can't happen. But somehow you got to be able to do that. And your tool has evolved far enough to enhance and cut down the time it takes to go through all of those steps in that decision tree making. If I'm close or not close, I hope I am close.
You are extremely close. That is exactly correct. It's all about helping you to make a better decision faster, right? Yes. We aren't going to make decisions for folks, right? We can do 2 things. We can help you to make the better decision faster, or we can sort of upskill. So where people are emerging leaders, for example, and they need more support in making that decision, a senior leader can feel very comfortable with a C model in-house that their emerging leaders are using the right framework by which to make that decision. So this is so critical. What you said is it's better decisions faster. That's the way that I narrow that down. Because the human piece is so critically important. And I know we have AI, and AI is doing a lot of things, and and we utilize artificial intelligence in our system, but we have to augment that with real human expertise on purpose, right?
Because you feed that machine the wrong thing and you get the wrong outcome. So it is still AI, and it's still, machine learning, it's still learning. So
it is still learning, and context is everything, right? The context of the business is everything. The context of your situation is everything. The context of the human being is everything. So that contextual piece is very, very important, because without it, you can't create what is the common language. Right. So there's one thing to have, I got a large language model, but how does that transfer into like how Teasha communicates or talks, or what I need in order to understand or in order to decide? That's where this becomes, combining these things together becomes super powerful to solve the problem.
And I love that. And the reason I love that is because I am I love that you say the same language, being able to communicate, because it isn't language. It's the idea of communicating a thought or an action so that somebody understands, right? So you could be speaking gibberish and have somebody understand it. I mean, it's the whole root of the word logos, or a logo hieroglyphic kind of situation, where it says in one picture, you see a little swoop, and it looks like Nike from back in the Roman days. It's probably an athletic company, right? And it tells you that in 5 words or less. But I love that. So amazing stuff. Go ahead. Sorry.
Yeah, no, I was just going to add really quickly, language is really hard too. And I'm in full transparency. I am learning to master the ease of words. I am much more verbose, as you can see. I am far more verbal, but learning how to, the point you made is so important, because I actually had a person tell me this recently, which was, it's not about not sounding smart, right? But it is about how smart do you sound to the person that you're talking to, right? And do they understand it? Because their level of your being intelligent is, do they understand what it is that you're communicating, what you're saying? So that coming to the common language becomes so mission critical. And I think in the revenue maze, if I think about it, if you don't if you can't communicate, you will effectively sit yourself right in that maze.
You will stay right where you're at, banging your head against the wall
Right.
the whole time, trying to and saying, "Let me out, let me out."
Like, don't you guys hear me screaming?
Send in the helicopter. All right, Teasha, this has been so amazing. I know people want to know a little bit more about you, so I would love for you to just give us a quick, where's one, we'll put it in the show notes and everything else, your website, all that kind of stuff. But what's the best way to get a hold of you? Just one, and then what's your ask? I'm going to add that to the show this season. What's your ask? So, yeah.
So a couple of things. So my where I can be reached is you can reach us at CModel.io. So www.CModel.io. There is a contact form there. You can also I'm going to give you my email address, Teasha at CModel.io. Happy to converse and talk to people about decision intelligence and how it can help you to sort of really reach your growth potential. Like, what's the future look like for growth for your company? And then secondarily, we have a wait list. So my ask is currently have a wait list for closed beta of our AI growth advisor. Her name is Cora. And so we'd love for you to sign that. And you can go to our website again and find that link and sign up for Cora's waitlist. That would be fantastic. Thank you.
That's amazing. So yes, and I'm going to have an additional ask for Teasha. I'm going to say, one, she was a trooper. This was such a fun episode, but if some of you understood what went into this episode, you would know Teasha is definitely a trooper. Secondly, my ask is, if you like the show, literally share it, like it, and give comments. Let her know how much you appreciate what she's doing. And then my shameless ask is, this is another great episode of the Revenue Maze. I really have had a lot of fun. Like it, love it. If you really want to dive deep into some planning and some other things that are going on, check Teasha out, but also check out Revenue North Star, www.revenuenorthstar.com. We'd love very much to hear from you. And thank you to all my guests and listeners. It has been another great show.
Thank you so much.
Thank you all for joining another great episode. Hats off to all you small businesses out there. I can't wait for the next episode.